Hi, I'm Brian Russell, and I want to talk about expanding our limits by moving beyond our fears. One of the great things about living in Orlando is I can travel to the beach pretty much whenever I want to and enjoy the waves and the environment there along the ocean. And back in 2005, I had a literal life-changing moment on the beaches just south of Port Canaveral on the East Coast. I took my daughters to the beach that day, and it was an absolutely gorgeous day. But it was in the springtime still, so it was a little bit cold. And so when the kids were young, I would go to the beach, but those days became sandcastle days. And we got really good at making sandcastles. And my daughters always liked to make extra fancy ones. And one of the things that they did to make the sandcastle fancier, they wanted me to help them with, was they always liked to have a built-in swimming pool in the middle of their castle. And the way that you could do this really easily was to put the castle close enough to the water's edge that just by digging into the sand, you would hit the water underneath. If you got too close, the waves would come up and wipe it out. And if you were too far away, you wouldn't be able to dig down and find the water. Well, this day I started it poorly. It was poorly planned. And so we built the castle, but we couldn't get down to the water. We were too far away from the ocean. And so this got back to one of the other things I always liked to do at the beach was to attempt to get my daughters as tired as possible because they were young, so they would sleep really well. So I thought, you know what, girls, take your buckets down to the ocean, scoop up water, and bring it back to the castle, and we'll just fill up our pond, our built-in swimming pool right here. So they did. They ran back, and they'd bring the water up, and they poured it in. And you can imagine what happened. The water just seeped right down into the sand. I said, okay, girls, go back and do it again. And I'm kind of laughing to myself. Yeah, my plan's working. They're going to be really tired. And they ran back and forth several times. And then all of a sudden, the girls got really excited. They had scooped some water up, and they were looking in their buckets. And they're going, Dad, look at this, look at this. And they brought the bucket up, and I can look down. And what they had scooped up was they had scooped up a whole bunch of what we called baby seashells back in those days. The locals called them periwinkles. But in the springtime, these periwinkles, they would hatch, and you would see them. The water would wash them up, and then they would frantically try to bury themselves back into the sand before a seagull or something would come along and eat them. And so the girls saw the periwinkles, and they were trying to bury themselves in the bucket. And I said, yeah, this is really cool, girls. And then Michaela, my oldest daughter, said, Dad, can we take these home for pets? Do we have a little glass jar that we can put them in? And again, I didn't want to disappoint the girls. And I said, well, Michaela, we don't have the salt water that we can use that's going to be the same as the ocean. And she didn't understand that. And then I said, girls, turn around, and I want you to look out over the ocean. So they turned around, and it was a beautiful blue sky day. You could see way out to the horizon. And I said to the girls, how big is the ocean? And I remember my oldest turned around, her eyes were really big, and she goes, Dad, the ocean is huge. And I thought to myself, okay, I got him. I said, okay, Michaela, if you were a baby seashell, would you rather live in this huge ocean, be able to be friends with Nemo or Flipper or Shamu and go wherever the waters would carry you and become everything that God wanted you to be as a seashell and have friends with whoever you wanted to be friends with? Or would you rather just go back to Orlando and have to live in this little jar for the rest of your life? And Michaela goes, Dad, that's so easy. I'd rather live in the jar at our house. And then my heart just kind of sunk, and I thought, geez, I'm never going to understand kids. But then, so I just kind of said, why? Why, Michaela? And then she said this, and listen to this. I've never forgotten this. She said, Dad, because if I lived in the ocean, I might get eaten by a shark. And at that moment, this was a life transforming moment. I thought, what honesty. And it's almost like the scales fell off of my eyes of past, present, and future in my own life. And at that moment, I thought about myself. I thought, geez, I talk a good game, But deep down on the inside, I have self-imposed limits too. I think in many ways I live my life in the jar instead of in that ocean. The world whispers to us. There's a suffocating status quo that afflicts each of us, caused by our own fears and insecurities. I mean, some of those things we inherit from just the world systems or from our family systems. Some of our fears and insecurities come from experiences that we have and even parts of our personality. But think about what fear and insecurity does to us. It magnifies the risk, and it magnifies that possibility of failure over against highlighting the joy of really living life to its fullest, really living in the ocean. It made me ask that day, how many times in my life had I already missed living my best life, and I'd missed living God's dreams for me, God's calling on my life, because of the possibility of running into danger, that slim possibility of going to the ocean being eaten by a shark. These are some questions that I ask myself a lot. What am I really afraid of? What do I fear? What's keeping me from pursuing God's calling on my life? What's keeping me from really living out the life that I dream about? What self-imposed limitations do I live by that stifle my drive and my ability to achieve the things that my heart is really longing for me to go after? What would it look like if I chose to expand the boundaries in which I live? Friends, how big is your ocean? Is your ocean a glass jar? Is it maybe a farm pond? Or is it as big as the Pacific Ocean and the vastness of all the world's oceans? God wants us to swim in the deep. Thanks for listening. I'm Brian Russell. I'm your professor for life.